Hey guys, this is John over at CheatSheetPros, and today we're going to go over a few main things with Fantasy Cruncher. A lot of our members and users are using that as their main optimizer because they want a lot of features, and so I'm going to go over a tutorial of how to use Fantasy Cruncher. So the five we're going to focus on are the global exposure percentages, stacking, so that's basically using team stacks in NFL, and then we're going to go over how to use the group feature, and that's grouping certain players and using so many from that group, and we'll give you some examples of that. And then we're going to limit the players per team for min and max in Fantasy Cruncher, and I'm also going to show you how to upload your own projections. Now, you don't ever want to use default projections in an optimizer unless you're locking in a core, but I'm going to show you a quick way to do an export on Fantasy Cruncher, flip a few numbers, and then get some contrarian lineups that you can build pretty quick. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright guys, we're going to get started with the Fantasy Cruncher quick tutorial. So this tutorial is made for someone who has already used Fantasy Cruncher for a while, but not extremely intermediate with it yet. So I'm going to assume you know the basics of how to do the number of lineups, optimize them, find the players, lock them, like them, that stuff. So what we're going to touch on, like I said prior, is the global percentage, stacking, grouping, team min max, upload projections, and an easy way to pivot off the default projections that are in there. So let me go ahead and get started. So up here, the first thing you want to do on your game filter when you're looking through Fantasy Cruncher, you want to click this drop down and make sure you're on the right slate because it defaults to no slate. So you might be looking and there's people from the Kansas City game, or I'm sorry, the Sunday night game or Monday night game. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to choose main slate. That's going to filter out our players. And then up here, this is our upload data. So if you want to upload projections, you can copy and paste player name and projection in here, and we'll do that. And then our advanced options, this is where we're going to spend most of our time today. So when we click down here, we have a few things we're going to look at. Now, the first one, the global player exposure, right here, you can see this is set to 100%. That's standard for most of them. I like to change it to 50 and just click change all players. You can make it 25, 50, 75, 80, whatever you want. Anything between 0 and or 1 and 100. I guess you got to have at least 1% in there. And then we've got a randomness, which we'll touch on later, but you can add 5 or 10% to the randomness to get some different number of lineups in there. And then over here, the team salary, min-max, it's pretty standard. If for some reason you want to get real contrarian and the max salary you want is like $48,500 instead of $50,000 for DK, leave it blank. It's going to go all the way up to $50,000. Otherwise, you can put in this $48,500. The minimum you don't really need. It doesn't really spit out, a lineup that's like $35K. Unique players per lineup. So lots of times it might spit out 10 lineups and change one player 10 times if the projections fall just right. So it defaults to 1. So if you run it and you want to get a bigger player pool of more players, drop down to 2 or even 3. And if you don't want to do that, you could use randomness, and both of those options are going to give you more players. So the global exposure that you're going to use the most is right down here. So we're going to change ours to 50. And then over here, this is players per team. So you can change it all. Right now, it's sitting at a max of 6, which I believe that's the most that DraftKings will even let you do. And the minimum is 0. So for example, let's say Atlanta has a bunch of chalk plays and you're running lineups and it keeps putting 4 Atlanta players in there. You can say, you know what, the most I want is 2. And then that will give you no more than 2 players for Atlanta in your lineups. And lots of times, once you run a couple of times, you can see what it's spitting out. You can come back here and make some changes. Or like if let's say you think Baltimore is going to score 50 points today, I want a minimum of 4 Baltimore guys in my lineup. And you can make those changes, and that will give you some different lineups. I'm just going to take them back to the defaults for now. And then in here, in this advanced tab, this is under general. And then we've got position stacks, team stacks, groups, and my data. So the second one we're going to look at are position stacks. So a position stack in NFL is what you want to do for a GPP. So this is stacking a QB with a wide receiver, a tight end, or both. I put these in earlier when I was prepping for the video, so let's do it again. So we want our QB with at least one player of a wide receiver or a tight end from same team. So this is saying it's going to take our QB, and any QB it puts in our lineup, it's going to give us either a wide receiver or a tight end with that QB. So that's a stack option. So we're going to add a stacking rule. Now, say, for example, you want to do a super stack. Now, that's a pretty weak stack. So let's say we want 2 players. So we're going to get 2 players out of the wide receivers and tight ends from the same team. And then you want to run it back. You can say, okay, and then I want a wide receiver, at least one from opposing team. So this is going to give you, I believe it's one wide receiver from the opposing team. So when you put that in here, no position selected for stack. All right, we'll stick that in there. So this is going to give you on, let's say, Team A versus Team B. Team A is going to have the QB and 2 receiving positions. And then the opposite team, Team B, is going to have at least 1 wide receiver from there. And you could do wide receiver, tight end, whatnot, either way. But that's how you do your stacks. Team stacks, if you don't want to specify a specific position, you can come in here and say, okay, in this Buffalo New England game, I want 6 players out of the game. And then go in, run your lineups, and it's going to put 6 of your players out of this game and mix and match. If you want to stack 2 teams, say you think, I think New England's going to win and Baltimore, and I want, 4 players out of those, you can do it. Or you can do 6 and then take the majority of them. There's a lot of different options and different features that you can use, so you just got to find out what works for you and what you like. I know when you're doing game stacks, this is a good way to just go bing, bing, 6 players, run it. And then you can even do a percentage in here of how many times you want that stack to come out. A lot of different options. But again, once you get it filled out, just click this add stock up here, or add stack. And then groups. Now groups is fun, so I went ahead and pre-filled this. So if, let's say in NFL, you have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. They're the 2 most notorious players. One of them is going to go boom and score a ton of fantasy points, and the other one's going to have 2 catches for 20 yards. Typically, earlier in the year, it was Chris Godwin and Mike Evans was putting up duds. And then it flipped, and Mike Evans was going nuts, and Godwin was putting up duds. And so I would run a lot of my lineups saying, must use at least 1 player from this group. And I'd put Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. Another one you could do is Tyler Lockett or DK Metcalf. If you think Seattle's going up against a team that's giving up a ton of passing yards and they're going to have to throw the ball a lot, maybe pick all 3 of their receivers and say, play 2 of these. So for example, we got this in here. We put it in there as a stack. We're going to play 1 of these. And then on our global exposure, we're at 50%. So if we run 20 lineups, it's going to give us 50 with Lockett and 50% with Lockett and 50% with Metcalf. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. And so down here, I'm just going to put 10 lineups, projections. We're going to run it. And then over here, this is going to show you your total. And we should have 50% of Lockett. Yep, so we have 50% of Lockett and 50% of Metcalf, but one of them is in every one of our lineups. So we're going to double check it. So we've got Metcalf here, we have Lockett here, Metcalf, Lockett, and on down the list, Metcalf, Lockett. But what gets really creative is you can do this with 2 or 3 different teams. So if you can find 3 guys that are inversely related, and even in NBA, if you have like Harden and Westbrook, and one of them is going to have a 7x day, do 50% of your lineups with Harden and 50% with Westbrook, and that's how you would enter it. You would go up and take the group option and just say choose one from this group. I do it with value plays. I do it with wide receivers. I'll do it with 2 studs on the same team just to make sure I get 1 of each, and then you can kind of get some contrarian lineups, and you hurt yourself, but you also get some where you're going to have a couple lineups that have like 3 studs go off. And so this is what your spit up lineups look like, and you can export these directly into Excel. You can even unselect this box and they'll all disappear. And there's this little arrow here. You can click that, and then you can go to export, and you got to pick your slate because you want to have the right player IDs. Otherwise, DraftKings will not accept it. And then it will upload this into Excel for you. And then you can just save this to your desktop, which is similar to ours. And then one thing I want to do is, let me go ahead and erase this stack. So we're going to talk about using projection. So what you don't want to use is just run basic lineups off of default projections. You want to have at least a little bit of a twist on your own, or lock in some core players. So what you can do, now I do this with my cheat sheets. I'll take all my players, put them in there, and then I use my last 10 ceiling, my average fantasy points per game, and their projection. But just to give you a quick tutorial without breaking all of that out and making this video really long, I'm going to show you how to do it with just Cruncher. So you can come in here and go copy player list, and it's going to copy them. Now I'm going to go ahead and bring up Excel, and then we're just going to paste them in here. So we know all of the player names are going to be correct because we took them out of there. And then just to make this simple, I'm going to go ahead and erase these columns here. I want 3 columns. I want ceiling, I want 2019 average, and then I want FC projection. And I don't care about the standard deviation, the 2018 average, and all this stuff. These are the 3 columns that I want that we're going to work off of. So what I like to do, and it's just a basic little formula. So we're going to call this new projection. And I like to make it a color. I'm picky like that. And then we're going to take this. And so what I like to do is, let me write it over here. So I like to do 40% of projection, and then 30% of average, and then 30% of ceiling. It's just a basic number. I mean, you can do 50, 25, 25. You can do 60, 20, 20, 70, 20, 10, whatever you want. I've just found this is easy, and it gives us, it mixes it up because it puts your ceiling in there and gives you a good chunk of players. But then your average kind of brings it back to the middle. But then you have the large majority of about half the projection is their current projection. So that's pretty good. So then to do that, let me move my cord here. So I don't know how advanced you are in Excel. This is pretty basic. So you're just going to do equal, and we're going to do a bracket, and we're going to do C2. So that's going to be our ceiling number times. So our ceiling's 30%. So we're going to do 0.3. We do another bracket. And then we're going to do plus D2 times 0.3 plus bracket. And then we're going to do E2 times 0.4 for our current. And so what that's saying is C2 is column C2. That's our ceiling, our average, and you can see it highlighted here. And then we're going to hit OK. So that's going to generate us a new point. Now, one thing you want to do is go up here to number. I always like to change it to number, and I do 2 decimal places. And then that way when you click in that cell, it says number and not general. If you get used to doing that, it'll save you a lot of headache in the future when you go to sort, when you're working on other Excel projects. When you're in this box and you have it highlighted, I don't know if you can see it right down here, there's a square in the bottom right-hand corner. And when you hover over it, it gives you a plus sign. Click and hold, and then drag this all the way down. And this is going to get us in some players that doesn't even matter. And then that's going to give us our new projection. And then if you want to make this a table, you can hit Control-A, all, go to Format as Table, and then My Table has headers. Yes, that just means the column titles. We're going to click that, and then that way we can sort high to low. And then you can see, you know, what it's projected compared to the old. So let's look at a couple. So Lamar Jackson's projected at 26.12. With our new formula, it projects him at 34.4. And so basically what that's doing is it's taking his current projection with his average and his ceiling, and it's raising it a little bit because he's got a ceiling. So it's going to put him a little bit more in our GPP lineups. The same with McCaffrey. It's going to take him, he's projected at 23.6 and move him up to 33.4. It's going to move Michael Thomas up quite a bit. So let's just go ahead and put these in there. So to make it easy, I'm just going to copy the whole columns. So you want the player name and the projection, and that's why my grade tab has player name projection next to it, because I do this for NBA every day. you're going to go here to upload data, and then you're going to just do Control V, which is paste, and that's going to put everybody in, and then you can just delete this top name or new projection. If you hit upload with it, it'll just give you an error. It says, hey, we couldn't find player name player. And then once you have it here, click upload. Most of them are going to come through. They're going to turn green because it's the same name. There's going to be a match, so you don't have to worry about digging up anything extra. Once it turns green and they're uploaded, then you can come here and see what your new projections. So like we just looked at, Lamar's there. It's got a lot of QBs, Titans D. So let's go ahead and run 10 lineups and see kind of what it spits out that's a little different. So this is going to be, let's call this one custom, and you can name these custom projection. Okay. And then let's do 10 off Fantasy Cruncher projection, and we'll see if we get lineups that are the same or different. So we're just going to call this one FC. All right, so both of them, so Fantasy Cruncher did 10 lineups, 23 players. Ours did 10 lineups, 22 players. And then let me see if I can set these side by side. Let me grab this real quick. Okay, so I screenshotted the Cruncher projections here, and then I did ours. So we can see we've both got Keenan Allen. So on ours, there's no Julio Jones, so that's something I would look at. So his average has been down, so he's going to be more in the current projection than in our projection, just because his average is bringing him down. So that's something I would go back in and change, just because we know Julio's a stud. Keenan Allen comes up in the lot, or he comes up, whoops, he comes up for us too, so we'll look past him. So another one that comes up is Mike Williams in the normal, but he doesn't come up in the top end of ours. And then, of course, we got some Wilson. Now, DeAndre Washington. Now, this is someone, since Josh Jacobs is not playing, he's not going to come up in ours if you run a default projection like that, because he's getting the start and he really hadn't played all year. So he has shit for a ceiling and he doesn't really have a good 2019 average. So that's someone you want to go back and say, okay, change his projection over to the Fantasy Cruncher or a default one to put him in there. But anyways, that's just one way to do something different and run it. And one of the things you can do over here with Cruncher is you can run it by all these different things. So you can go off Fantasy Crunchers, you can go off your projections, Crunchers projections, you can go off ceiling, floor, average, 2019 average, 2018 average. There was someone in the group earlier that was running a average projection, and just be careful with that because it's going to put a lot of players in there that maybe they're hurt or out for the year. So don't do it blindly, just pay attention. But again, this is the tutorial I just wanted to do real quick for the Advanced Fantasy Cruncher. So what I would recommend if you are on Fantasy Cruncher right now is the first thing you do when you come in here is go in and upload your own projections. If you've got our premium sheets or it's a Thursday, just pull them directly off of our sheet and upload them. That will at least give you something different that not everybody on FC is using. The second thing, come in here to your global exposure and change this to 25, 50, or 75. Just find out what works for you. And then you can determine if you're doing NFL, do some position or team stacks. Play around with that a little bit. If you're doing NBA, I don't do a lot of team stacks there. It doesn't make sense. But I will do a lot of the group feature and go through and just pick you a group of players that you like. And if you've got 10 GPP algo plays you love, put them in here and say, must use 5 of these guys, and it'll mix and match everybody else for you. So anyways, I hope this was helpful for you. If you have any questions, let me know. And again, I'll do some more tutorials in the future. But again, that's kind of the basic information that you need to use this, get started, and go with it. So good luck, guys.